So today, I want to do something I don't normally do. I want to debunk some myths about ayahuasca that are floating around out there, specifically about a gentleman who calls himself the medical medium, which I know a lot of you follow. I assume just about everybody, at least in the spiritual spaces, has heard of the medical medium. He has millions of followers, and I want to first start by honoring the fact that he has brought in some really instrumental awarenesses. He helped create the celery juice movement, which I know is instrumental for a lot of people in their day-to-day health. He's a man who professes to have a connection to spirit, and he's brought in a different way of looking at our healing journey, and a lot of it is amazing. So I am not here to discredit him as a whole. But there's a theme that's happening with him that has happened to many other spiritual leaders before, and I want to call that out as well as dispel some myths that he is sharing specifically about ayahuasca. So first of all, the medical medium is a channel, which he self-proclaimed, the channel from spirit that brings in advice around healing. And a lot of it is amazing, right? But what has happened over the years is a lot of us who subscribe to the teachings that he shares have essentially given him a pedestal and made him a guru, which is always, always, always dangerous. And it's very interesting, right? Because a lot of us are attracted to the wisdom that the medical medium shares because we're really disenchanted by the allopathic medical world. We've been let down by our doctors and practitioners because doctors don't have all the answers, right? The old way, before we had this awakened awareness of the allopathic system, was to give our power to the doctors and to trust that they knew what our bodies needed, which isn't true. And now we're doing it to shamans and to people like the medical medium, of like giving away our power and assuming that everything that he says is gospel channeled from spirit, which is never true when there's a human being involved. So we've taken this man that maybe at one point had a true pure connection to spirit. I don't know, I can't say either way, but it's very clear that he's in a very narcissistic space now because he doesn't actually think that what he's channeling could have anything but truth in it. And you can tell by his language. He has no space for any perspective that is different than his. He's very defensive, and as the years have gone on, the statements he makes are getting increasingly unhinged and kind of scary. And it wouldn't be scary if we weren't giving away our power and our discernment to him. We've made him into a guru, in that there's a lot of people in the plant medicine space that I know that think everything that he shares and says is from spirit and it must be true. And it's not. It can't be for any of us. It certainly isn't true for me. So if you're dealing with someone, no matter the level of wisdom they have coming through them, if they think that their truth is the truth and not a possible truth, if they don't have space for somebody else's opinion to be equally valid as what they believe to be true, you're dealing with somebody who's mentally ill, not wise. So please hold that in your awareness, and let's stop giving our sovereignty over the most precious things we have, which is our personal health and the relationship with our body, to anyone. Anyone, doctors, mediums, shamans, etc. Now, to speak specifically to some of the things he said about ayahuasca, I'm going to give some direct quotes because it just shows that they're not based in any sort of grounded reality. There's a video actually on YouTube where he talks about the dangers of working with ayahuasca, and these quotes come directly from it. He says, people literally throw their brains out of their guts. That's an actual quote. And that a single dose of ayahuasca can cause psychosis and create someone who is lifeless for years. There's no basis in truth to that. There is a basis in truth that people can be left in a more challenged space after ayahuasca, but that's not her fault. He doesn't do anything to describe why it might be true that she's a challenging medicine for people to work with that isn't for everyone, because she unearths the reality of what it is to be human and to go on a healing journey, but she's not responsible for a single dose of putting somebody into a lifeless psychosis for years. That doesn't happen. He also says that a real smart shaman says that we're now giving lower doses so that people can actually survive ayahuasca. It's not true. We're not giving lower doses of medicine to people so they can survive it. She's survivable. She's not a deadly medicine. People don't die working with her. He's implying that they do. And that now he's saying unequivocally that ayahuasca circles are giving diluted doses because we know that she causes brain damage. There's absolutely no basis in truth to that. Again, I'm not advocating that she isn't a tricky medicine to work with, but these superlative statements are completely based in his delusional reality, not the actual truth of working with the medicine. I don't think he's ever worked with her. I don't think he has any clue of how she works. So he says that it's so brain damaging, it's unbelievable. Ayahuasca is brain damaging, and that there are no studies to show that ayahuasca has any benefits on the brain. That is also unequivocally not true. There are limited studies because as a medicine that isn't a pharmaceutical medicine, Big Pharma doesn't spend a lot of money researching it. But because she's been kind of a hot commodity lately around the healing spaces, there are some studies that happen both in the US and internationally that show what happens with ayahuasca is beneficial to the brain. He says that the spiritual trip that ayahuasca creates is actually the result of your brain neurons being damaged. That's a direct quote from the medical medium, that the spiritual trip itself is a result of brain damage. Unequivocally not true, and there are actually studies, in addition to hundreds of thousands of people who have experienced her medicine and haven't come out brain damaged. He also says that anyone who uses this medicine for 20 years, it will stupefy you for the rest of your life, and that you will be able to only watch cartoon movies. These are direct quotes. I've been working with her for 20 years, as it happens, thousands of doses of medicine. I can say without any shadow of a doubt that my brain is healthier, my entire being is happier. I don't even think I would be alive right now if it weren't for Aya. So 20 years of working with her does not stupefy your brain, and I do more than watch cartoon movies, so I'm living proof. I just want to reflect back the fallacies that he shares, not just because I'm defensive of the medicine, I love her very much, but also because he has such a huge audience. He is deterring people from a healing space because he's making them afraid. And so many people believe what he's saying is gospel, and that they think that this medicine might hurt them, that they're not allowing themselves the path of healing because of that. He also says this about giving blood, by the way, that it's vampiric and dangerous. Do you know how many thousands of people are alive now because people are willing to give blood? So he's causing serious damage with people in the healing spaces that want to believe what he says is true and are actually denying themselves healing and possibly life-saving treatments to other people. We need to stop giving our power away to people who turn into narcissists, which is what has happened with him. We have the power of whether or not we're going to believe this and be discerning and actually fact check and feel into. I mean, I feel like if you listen to him, you can feel how unhinged and ungrounded he is. Somebody's asking, do I feel like his food advice is solid aside from the Aya perspective? I'm not a nutritionist, so it's not really my area of expertise, but some of it seems solid. I don't necessarily prescribe to the idea that eggs are the most, what does he call it, viral spreading food that exists. Not my experience. What I'm suspect with him is not the knowledge that comes through, it's the fact that he speaks about it as if it is unequivocally true and there's no space for argument. That's narcissism. It isn't actually wisdom, and I think if you really listen to him, you can see that he's incredibly insecure about what he's sharing. I don't think he has a deep relationship with that spirit connection because he's so damn defensive, and he won't engage in any dialogue where there might be, like a reflection of, hey, maybe that isn't true. Maybe there's something else that can be true in addition to that. But yeah, I mean, I did his liver cleanse. It didn't change my life, but it felt good. And so I think there's a lot, that's the tricky thing with him and with people like him, is we want the megalomaniac sort of narcissism to be the whole truth and erase all the wisdom of what might be coming through that is true. And it doesn't work that way. He can be both. He can have profound wisdom coming through him and also be completely unhinged and totally in a spiritual space with his ego. Like that ego is like next level out of the building. But both can be true. And there's one more thing that the medical medium has recently come out with that I want to dispel around a myth with ayahuasca. His latest book, whatever it's called, he says that ayahuasca and the entheogens are riddled with heavy metal toxins. Well, interestingly enough, I just recently had a heavy metal test with my naturopath before this came out. And again, I've been working with ayahuasca for 20 years, entheogens for longer than that. And I don't have any heavy metal poisoning except for a little mercury, and I think that's from sushi because I love me some sushi. But tiny bit of elevated mercury levels, everything is clear sailing. He is speaking untruths. He has nothing to back up any of these horrendous statements, and he is discouraging his followers that have given him their sovereignty over their bodies, full right to discredit something that could actually be healing for them. So I just ask us all to be more discerning and to not give pedestals to people like the medical medium that want to pretend that everything that comes through their mouths is pure golden truth. It's just never true. Somebody's saying that they've also heard him say that ayahuasca works by making the brain think it's dying. I wouldn't trust anybody to be an authority around something that they've never actually worked with. And here's the biggest irony about the medical medium is that in many ways what he's doing is shamanic. He's connecting with spirit. He's being a bridge walker between the tangible and the intangible worlds. That's what a shaman does. And yet he's discrediting the entire world of ayahuasca shamanism. He's absolutely terrible in his language around shamans and the lineages, the wisdom keepers that have been guarding this information around health long before he was ever on the scene. So the irony is that he could find allies in the shamanic space because he's doing similar work if he knew how to build a bridge of respect, but he doesn't. So somebody's saying one of the first things that she noticed was that Aya purges heavy metals and that she had the experience of detoxing heavy metals because of Aya. Yeah, me too. She doesn't contain heavy metals. She helps us to clean these out. And then someone's asking if I will speak about working with ayahuasca when you are chronically ill physically. People with cancer sit with Aya. Yeah, they do. The thing with cancer is not something that doesn't go well with the medicine. Chemo is, the different allopathic drugs. So I sat next to a woman once that had stage 4 breast cancer. And in the middle of the ceremony, she had a big healing with the shaman and she doesn't have breast cancer anymore. Now, she wasn't doing chemo, so it was safe for her to sit. But, anything is possible in these spaces as long as we're not working with anything that's contraindicative. And I'm not saying the Western world can't heal us too. Whatever it is that we want to commit to is perfect in healing. Whatever creates that healing is perfect. So yes, if you have cancer, you can sit with ayahuasca and it's safe. The biggest issues with ayahuasca that aren't safe physically are heart conditions. Basically, if you can't get on a roller coaster and go for a wild ride, don't drink the medicine, because that kind of intensity, if it's going to cause any issues with you physically, you shouldn't sit with her. And the same is true without some level of stability around our relationship with our minds and our emotional beings. The medical medium is not wrong in saying that some people are worse off after Aya, but it's not ayahuasca's fault that the condition of being human and going through the process of trying to understand being separate and unified is fucking difficult. So to blame the medicine and to say she's the culprit for the fact that our journeys as human beings are incredibly complex and incredibly difficult is just outright wrong, and it's not fair, and it's a continuation of the vilification of nature. And I'm kind of tired of it. So no more giving our power away to people who think that they only speak truth. That is a big red flag. And please, let's not vilify nature for the fact that our journeys are difficult as human beings. She's there to help us, not to make things worse. So let's be in alignment with that. Next week, I'm going to talk about why it's perfectly okay to get very angry with ayahuasca, mushrooms, wachuma, these amazing sacred plants that we're working with. It's okay to show them the dark side of our emotions. And I'm going to share some personal stories around that. So thank you for being here, always. It's an honor to connect with you all, and I'll see you next week. Until then, be safe out there and don't give anybody your sovereignty.